Capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, président du Faso.
In a moment that will be etched in the annals of African history, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, has once again asserted his unmatched influence across the continent, this time without even setting foot in Gabon. The recent inauguration of Gabon's new president, General Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema, who rose to power after ousting the long-ruling Bongo dynasty, was a grand affair attended by a constellation of African heads of state. Yet, it was the mere mention of Captain Traoré's name that ignited a firestorm of cheers, leaving the attending leaders stunned, embarrassed, and overshadowed by a man who wasn't even present. This electrifying episode, coupled with Traoré's commanding presence at Ghana's presidential inauguration earlier this year, and the continent-wide protests in his defense against imperialist slander, underscores one undeniable truth. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not just a leader, he is a movement, a symbol of African sovereignty, and a relentless challenge to the status quo. But then the announcer began, Captain Ibrahim Traoré's representative. Before the sentence could even conclude, the stadium erupted. For over a minute, the crowd's roar was deafening. Chants of Traoré, Traoré reverberated through the arena, drowning out all else. The energy was electric. A spontaneous outpouring of admiration for a man who had chosen to send his prime minister up in his stead. The other leaders, accustomed to the spotlight, were left visibly uncomfortable, their polite smiles masking the sting of being upstaged. Sources close to the event reported that some presidents exchanged awkward glances, while others stared straight ahead, their silence betraying their unease. The people of Gabon had hoped to see Traoré in person. Social media posts in the lead-up to the inauguration buzzed with excitement, with Gabonese youth expressing their desire to witness the young captain's charisma firsthand. "We wanted IB to come himself," said Marie-Claire Ayang, a 24-year-old student in Libreville. "He's the only leader who speaks for us, who fights for Africa's soul." Traoré's decision to send a representative was strategic, some analysts suggest, signalling his focus on Burkina Faso's internal challenges while still commanding influence abroad. But the crowd's reaction made one thing clear: Traoré's absence only amplified his presence. Imagine, for a moment, if Traoré had attended. The scenes in Libreville could have rivaled a rock star's concert. The fact that his mere name sparked such fervor is a testament to his cult-like following across Africa. A following that leaves traditional leaders scrambling to understand the source of his magnetic appeal. This was no isolated incident. It was a repeat of a pattern that has humiliated Africa's political elite time and again, most notably in Ghana just weeks earlier. On January 7th, 2025, Captain Traoré physically attended the inauguration of Ghana's newly elected president, John Mahama, in Accra. The event was a high-profile gathering with 17 African heads of state present, including heavyweights like South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa and Ethiopia's Abiy Ahmed. The ceremony was meant to celebrate Ghana's democratic transition, but it was Traoré who became the unintended centerpiece. As each leader was introduced, the crowd offered respectful applause until Traoré's name was called. The response was seismic. Thousands of Ghanaians, young and old, erupted into cheers, waving Burkina Faso's flag alongside Ghana's. Videos circulating on X captured the moment. Traoré, dressed in his signature military fatigues and beret, acknowledged the crowd with a raised fist, his stoic demeanor barely concealing a flicker of pride. The ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes, dwarfing the reception for every other leader, including the host, President Mahama. The contrast was stark. Leaders like Togo's Nassing Bey, whose family has ruled for over half a century, and Cameroon's Paul Biya, a perennial fixture in African politics, received tepid claps. Sources at the event noted that some presidents appeared visibly rattled. "You could see it in their faces," said Kofi Mensah, a Ghanaian journalist who attended. "They're used to being the ones adored, or at least respected. But Traoré, he's on another level. It's like he's speaking directly to the people, bypassing the elite." Traoré's appearance was not without controversy. His decision to wear a holstered pistol, a rare move for a head of state at such an event, sparked debate. Security analyst Vladimir Antwi-Danso called it unusual, noting that host nations typically ensure the safety of visiting leaders. But for Traoré's supporters, it was a bold statement of defiance, a reminder of his readiness to defend his revolution against any threat. "He's not here to play their games," tweeted Africa Rising, a popular Pan-Africanist account. IB is a warrior, not a politician. The Ghana inauguration was a microcosm of Traoré's broader impact. He doesn't just attend events, he transforms them into referendums on African leadership. His ability to command such adulation exposes the disconnect between many African leaders and their people, who view traditional politicians as out of touch or complicit in neo-colonial systems. For the leaders who sat in Accra, the message was clear. Their grip on legitimacy is slipping, and Traoré is the yardstick by which they are now measured. Why does Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a 37-year-old military captain from a small, landlocked West African nation, inspire such devotion? The answer lies in his unapologetic Pan-Africanism, his defiance of Western hegemony, and his tangible actions to uplift Burkina Faso's masses. Since seizing power in a September 2022 coup, Traoré has positioned himself as the heir to Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary icon who was assassinated in 1987. Like Sankara, Traoré preaches self-reliance, sovereignty, and the rejection of imperialist exploitation, ideas that resonate deeply with a generation tired of poverty, corruption, and foreign meddling. Traoré's policies are as bold as his rhetoric. He has expelled French military forces from Burkina Faso, terminated exploitative mining contracts, and redirected national resources toward education, healthcare, and food security. His government's decision to provide free healthcare and education, as noted in posts on X, has won him admiration even in countries far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. He has also forged new alliances, notably with Russia, to counter Western influence, a move that has endeared him to those who see France and the US as perpetuating Africa's underdevelopment. But it's not just policy. Traoré's persona, youthful, charismatic, and unapologetically African, sets him apart. He shuns the lavish suits and motorcades of traditional leaders, opting for military fatigues and direct engagement with citizens. His speeches, often delivered in local languages, are laced with references to African history and calls for unity. Burkina Faso is not against anyone, but we will no longer tolerate looting, he declared at a rally in Ouagadougou, a line that has become a rallying cry across the continent. Traoré's appeal is also rooted in his authenticity. Unlike many leaders who pay lip service to Pan-Africanism, Traoré lives it. His refusal to attend the Gabon inauguration in person, for instance, was seen by supporters as a rejection of performative diplomacy. "He's not here to clap for coups that don't serve the people," wrote Pan-African Vibe on X. Gabon's junta must prove it's not just another bongo in disguise. The crowd's reaction in Libreville suggests that many Gabonese share this skepticism, viewing Traoré as the gold standard for revolutionary leadership. If Traoré's influence at inaugurations was a wake-up call for African leaders, the continent-wide protests in his defense on April 30th, 2025 were a thunderclap. Sparked by inflammatory remarks from US AFRICOM Commander General Michael Langley, who accused Traoré of using Burkina Faso's gold reserves for personal protection, the demonstrations saw thousands take to the streets in Burkina Faso, Ghana, Liberia, and beyond. The protests, organised under the banner Hands Off the AES, Alliance of Sahel States, comprising Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, were a powerful rebuke of foreign interference and a celebration of Traoré's leadership. Langley's comments, made during a US Senate hearing on April 3, 2025, were seen as a thinly veiled attempt to discredit Traoré amid Burkina Faso's foiling of a coup plot allegedly orchestrated from Ivory Coast. The generals claim that Traoré was misusing gold reserves, a resource Burkina Faso has reclaimed from Western companies, ignited outrage. "Our gold, not yours," Traoré fired back, a sentiment echoed by protesters who waved placards reading, "Langley is a liar and Traoré is Africa's hope." In Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, over 10,000 people gathered at the Place de la Révolution, chanting, "Long live Captain Traoré." Some held banners depicting General Langley alongside Western leaders accused of destabilizing Africa. Demonstrator Haroun Sawadogo captured the mood. If they want to eliminate Captain Traoré, they should eliminate the people first. In Ghana, protesters marched through Accra, while in Liberia, a contingent of activists, including Liberians Sekou and Mariam Dukali, travelled to Ouagadougou to join the rally. "I came to support Captain Traoré because he represents hope for Africa, hope for black people, hope for all freedom fighters around the globe," Dukali said. The protests weren't confined to Africa. In the African diaspora, particularly in France, where Burkina Faso's community has faced harassment for supporting Traoré, solidarity rallies denounced Langley's remarks as imperialist propaganda. Social media amplified the movement, with hashtags like #StandWithTraoré and HandsOffASS trending across X. Videos of the protests, shared widely, showed a diverse coalition, youth, musicians, intellectuals, united in their defense of Traoré's vision. What made these protests a shocker to African leaders was their scale and spontaneity. No other African leader has inspired such a coordinated cross-border outpouring of support. Presidents like Ivory Coast's Alassane Ouattara, accused of sheltering coup plotters, and Benin's Patrice Talon, alleged to host French bases, face sharp criticism from protesters who see them as complicit in Western efforts to undermine Traoré. The demonstrations exposed a growing divide. While some leaders cling to old alliances with the West, Traoré's popularity signals a shift toward a new, uncompromising African identity. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's singular status as Africa's most celebrated leader stems from his ability to embody the aspirations of a continent at a crossroads. At 37, he represents a generation that has grown up witnessing the failures of post-independence governance, corruption, debt traps, and foreign domination. His coup in 22 was not just a power grab. It was a response to the Burkinabe people's demand for change, fueled by the government's inability to curb jihadist violence that has displaced millions and killed thousands. Traoré's leadership is defined by action. His expulsion of French troops, rejection of the CFA franc, and nationalisation of key industries have made Burkina Faso a laboratory for African sovereignty. These moves resonate in countries like Gabon, where citizens are wary of a junta that may perpetuate elite rule, and in Ghana, where youth demand leaders who prioritise local needs over foreign interests. Traoré's refusal to bow to Western pressure, even in the face of sanctions and coup attempts, has earned him the moniker Africa's Che Guevara. His personal story adds to his allure. A shy schoolboy turned special forces captain, Traoré's rise from obscurity to global icon mirrors the dreams of millions of African youth. His military background, including counter-terrorism missions in northern Burkina Faso, gives him credibility as a leader who understands sacrifice. Unlike leaders who inherit power or buy loyalty, Traoré's legitimacy comes from his connection to the masses, a connection that other leaders, with their private jets and foreign bank accounts, cannot replicate. The embarrassment Traoré inflicts on his peers is not just about crowd reactions, it's about what those reactions reveal. African leaders, many of whom rely on electoral manipulation or Western backing, are losing ground to a man who speaks the language of the streets. The cheers in Gabon and Ghana, the protests across borders, are a warning. The people want leaders who fight for them, not against them. Traoré's ability to inspire such loyalty, even in countries he doesn't govern, is a phenomenon that no other leader can match. The events in Gabon, Ghana and the streets of Ouagadougou are more than isolated moments. They are a clarion call for Africa's political class. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has exposed the fragility of their legitimacy, revealing a hunger for leaders who prioritise sovereignty, dignity and self-reliance. His absence in Gabon did not diminish his influence. It magnified it, proving that his ideas transcend borders and resonate with a continent yearning for change. For the leaders who sat in Libreville and Accra, the message is unmistakable: adapt or be left behind. The crowds that cheered Traoré are not just celebrating a man, they are endorsing a vision of Africa unbound by neo-colonial chains. As Traoré himself said, We own it. We use it whenever we want and sell it to whomever we want. This is the voice of a new Africa, and it is a voice that will not be silenced. As Burkina Faso navigates its challenges, jihadist insurgencies, economic sanctions and relentless coup plots, Traoré remains a beacon of hope. His supporters from the markets of Ouagadougou to the streets of Accra and Libreville see him as more than a president. He is a symbol of what Africa can become. The protests in his defence, the roars at inaugurations, and the global solidarity rallies are not just about Traoré. They are about a continent reclaiming its destiny. To African leaders, the lesson is clear. The era of business as usual is over. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has set a new standard, and the people are watching. Will they rise to meet it, or will they continue to be eclipsed by the revolutionary from Burkina Faso? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Africa's future belongs to those who dare to dream as boldly as Traoré does. As the dust settles on the electrifying events in Gabon, Ghana and the streets of Ouagadougou, one truth stands tall. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not just a leader. He is a living manifesto for Africa's liberation. His unyielding commitment to sovereignty, his defiance of Western dictates, and his unwavering belief in the power of African self-determination have set a blazing example that Africa's leaders can no longer ignore. The time for half measures and capitulation to foreign agendas is over. If African leaders dare to emulate Traoré's courage and vision, they can unleash a renaissance that will transform the continent into a global powerhouse, forcing the West to reckon with Africa as an equal. The question is, will they rise to the challenge or cling to the fading shadows of neo-colonial servitude? Captain Traoré's leadership in Burkina Faso is a masterclass in what happens when an African leader trusts in the genius of their people over the hollow promises of Western aid. By rejecting exploitative contracts, expelling foreign military bases, and prioritizing local industries, Traoré has shown that Africa's wealth, its gold, its land, its mines, can fuel its own progress. His policies are not mere rhetoric, they are a roadmap. Free education and healthcare, investments in agriculture, and the revival of cultural pride have begun to lift Burkina Faso from the grip of poverty and insecurity. This is not a utopian dream, but a tangible reality, proving that African solutions work when leaders have the guts to implement them. African leaders must take note. For too long, many have danced to the tune of Washington, Paris and London, signing lopsided trade deals, hosting foreign troops, and begging for loans that chain their nations to debt. The result? Stagnation, inequality, and a continent bled dry of its potential. Traoré's example demands a seismic shift. Leaders must audit their economies, reclaim resources from predatory multinationals, and invest in infrastructure that serves Africans first. Imagine Nigeria harnessing its oil wealth to power local industries, or Kenya redirecting its tech boom to uplift rural farmers. This is the future Traoré envisions, one where Africa's riches fuel African dreams, not Western profits. What sets Traoré apart is his unshakable belief in Africa's capacity to stand on its own. Unlike leaders who seek validation from global summits or IMF approvals, Traoré looks to his people, the farmers, the youth, the artisans, as the architects of progress. This self-belief is the key to unlocking Africa's potential. If leaders across the continent adopted this mindset, the results would be transformative. Picture an Africa where governments prioritize STEM education to rival Silicon Valley, where regional trade under the AfCFTA outpaces reliance on European markets, and where renewable energy from Africa's sun and rivers powers cities that rival Dubai. This is not fantasy, it's achievable if leaders trust in African ingenuity. Ethiopia's Gerd Dam, built despite Western opposition, is proof of what's possible when a nation dares to dream big. Multiply that ambition across 54 countries, and Africa could lead the world in green technology, agriculture, and innovation by 2050. Leaders like Traoré understand that Africa's youth, over 60% of the continent's population, are not a burden, but a dynamo of creativity. Empower them with skills, jobs, and pride, and they will build an Africa that commands global respect. Self-belief also means rejecting the West narrative of Africa as a charity case. Leaders must stop attending donor conferences with outstretched hands and instead negotiate as equals. Traoré's alliances with Russia and China, while not perfect, show that Africa can choose its partners based on mutual benefit, not submission. If leaders in Ghana, Senegal or South Africa followed suit, investing in local manufacturing and banning raw resource exports, they could create millions of jobs and shift global trade dynamics. An Africa that processes its own cocoa, refines its own oil, and designs its own tech would dictate terms to the world, not the other way around. The West has long thrived on Africa's division and deference, but Traoré's rise signals a turning point. His defiance, calling out neo-colonial plots and surviving coup attempts, has already rattled Western capitals. Imagine the shockwaves if Africa's leaders collectively said, "Enough is enough." A united front, inspired by Traoré's courage, would force the West to rethink its approach, transforming Africa from a pawn into a partner. A unified Africa, speaking with one voice, could demand reforms at the UN, secure veto power on the Security Council, and rewrite global trade rules to favour African economies. Leaders must revive the spirit of the AU's founding fathers, Nkrumah, Lumumba, Nyerere, and build a bloc that no superpower can ignore. If Nigeria, Kenya, and Algeria joined Burkina Faso in expelling foreign bases, the Pentagon would lose its leverage overnight. If ECOWAS and SADC imposed sanctions on companies looting African minerals, Wall Street would scramble to negotiate. This is the power of collective action. An Africa that stands tall, as Traoré does, will command the respect it deserves. The West's shock would manifest in tangible ways. No longer able to dictate terms, they would offer technology transfers, fair trade agreements, and debt cancellations to stay relevant. France, which relies on African uranium and markets, would face an existential crisis if leaders like Traoré multiplied. The US, anxious about China's growing influence, would court African nations as equals, not subordinates. This is already happening. Traoré's deals with Moscow and Beijing have forced Washington to rethink its AFRICOM strategy. Scale this up, and the West will have no choice but to treat Africa as a peer, not a playground.